Hey, welcome to Unstable Topics, a fast-paced, jam-packed, unhinged bestie podcast filled with facts, reacts, and made-up games in between.
We're your hosts, Sarah
and Maggie.
And we're excited for you to join our best friend hangout, where we surprise one another with things we find interesting or hilarious just to see how the other will react.
Our friendship might be totally stable, but you never know what your bestie might throw your way to knock you off your game.
So come shake things up, learn something new, and laugh along with us. This is Unstable Topics.
Meanwhile, in New Jersey...
So, Marissa, what talking points do you want to hit on in this week's episode?
Well, Jackie, let's talk about how the film addresses the patriarchy. Ooh, and representation of marginalized people. Ooh, and even philosophical ramifications of good versus evil in horror.
We can point out the triangle boobs, talk about the blood splatter, and the practical effects. And also the male gaze?
My gaze at the males.
Hi-yo! From feminism to fangirling, the Jersey Ghouls cover all the bases of horror from a woman's perspective.
New episodes are uploaded every other Sunday.
Just search Jersey Ghouls to find us on social media and your favorite podcasting app.
Everybody, and welcome to another episode of Horror Movie Night. This week we are talking about 2001's Dagon as picked by Scott.
Yes.
Scott.
Going at Scott.
Yeah, I was waiting for somebody to make the joke. I'm really shocked that Matt didn't make it. You know, this one was kind of a 11th hour switcheroony for me because Kyle, it was top of my list, and
Kyle referenced it
he
as a
referenced
double
it,
feature. Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, I think I'm going to do it. And then he mentioned it again. And I was like, you're welcome, because we're watching it in a couple weeks. And
I think even when he mentioned it the second time, he was like, it's got some good parts. It's got some real bad parts.
Now, let me be clear. This isn't as good of a movie as last week. But I feel like what this movie does is it doesn't linger on much of anything.
No.
Which is great. It's an hour and 40 minutes. I didn't.
You know, it didn't feel like an hour and 40 minutes, honestly.
It doesn't feel that long.
Kind of moved. Yeah.
But and Kyle, maybe you can answer this question. Because I saw this movie in 2004 or 2005. It was an early film on Netflix streaming. And then I have literally not seen or thought about it since. So this was practically like watching it for the first time again. It's been almost 20 years since I've seen it. But I wrote down, what was this shot on? Because there's scenes where I almost feel like it's mini DV or something. And I couldn't remember if this was one of those films that was kind of talked about in indie film circles because they use digital technology before people were really using there's something that feels slightly off in the way this movie's shot, and I can't tell if it's them using what was a cheap / cutting edge technology at that time or what.
I don't know the answer for sure, so this is all just speculation. But I had multiple notes talking about how it looks, and it does. It feels very, I don't know if it's digital, one generation behind what they should have been shooting on in 2001. I don't know exactly what it is, but there's this aspect that I was
because even the colors pop in a weird kind of way, which actually helps the movie a little bit, but it's still it makes me think of when I had my little handheld mini DV camera that I would film stuff with.
I attributed it to sort of the I don't know if it was the budget or filming, I don't know what it was, but what I felt, I was Stuart Gordon is coming out of all his full moon stuff, and that's what he's been doing for years. And because like there are other films of his don't feel this way. This feels more similarly to like the full moon stuff that he was doing, at least visually, and also like editing wise, and just all this stuff just felt cheap sometimes. Yeah. But then at the same time, I was caught into this, and it did it again. I mean, I remember this movie fondly, but I knew that it had some parts, like you said, like that I was like not really keen on.
It's also really weird. It's a weird movie in the sense of if I was sitting down with somebody and I was trying to explain to them the difference between practical and CGI, I would show them this movie because there are practical effects that show up and you're like, for the people who are watching the video, Kyle's got an amazing practical effect happening behind him. And there's these moments where they're using actual practical effects. And then there's moments where like the most cartoonish tentacles I've ever seen in my life come out of a character's mouth. Oh, and I'm just like, what the fuck is this?
It felt like a DVD menu.
Yeah,
like those effects felt like DVD menu effects, and it's such a bummer. And unfortunately, that was originally what I walked away from the movie with most, like that first viewing, whenever it was. Like, for me, it was probably late 2000s, right? So like years after this was put out, but just digging into Lovecraft and Gordon, and I wish I had the time. I was trying to go back and read the story, The Shadows over Innsmouth beforehand, and I just didn't get around to it. But I love the story that this is presenting. I don't know if it reads the same way. Scott, have you read that short? I feel like
high school. I have not read that short since high school. I think that this is, well, let's just posit that this is the most faithful Dagon we've gotten.
Sure. Yeah. Good. Okay. And I feel like that was, and Gordon has done these other things that have been really not super faithful to Lovecraft, but he also nails a tone a way that a lot of other filmmakers don't, and so I was like, to me, Carly and I were watching it, and I was trying to tell a little bit. I was like, this feels like something Lovecraft would write, just adapting it to like a present day type of person. Like the people on the boat, she was like, this makes no sense. Like, why are these people on this boat? Like, who are they related to? Like all this stuff. And I was like, well, like it's a bourgeoisie like thing that is now on the ship, and now it's a class thing, and now they're in, I was like, it's a way of making a present day version of that, but it doesn't necessarily like land. But then when we get onto the actual village and we're exploring this village, it totally changed tone for us, for me, and I was like, I was happy to be in that world again. It's really interesting. I think being a New Englander too, like for me, sort of this seaside, even though it's European, I get it, and it just, I was like, it's icky and gooey and weird, and it turned up in a lot of ways that I didn't expect it to. The first third, I was like, oh man, this is going to suck. This is not going to be how I remembered it fondly.
I actually completely forgot the beginning of this movie. This is like the third time I've watched it, and I completely forgot that they start on a boat. I'm like, doesn't he have to go there because of some money thing? I mean, I guess I wasn't completely wrong, but like...
Yeah.
And you thought the tentacles were bad. The boat out to sea was horrible.
Yeah.
It was like, they almost looked like they cut it out of paper.
Well,
and
another one
did
that's...
like a woo!
Another one that's really bad, and this is, I'm going to read this note verbatim, is that my last note, I didn't write a ton of notes for this, but my last note said, this movie is wild because it'll literally show the worst CGI I've ever seen in my life, followed by an insanely impressive practical effect. Like that fish monster at the end of the movie, immediately after Barbara is eaten by an abysmal CGI creature at the bottom of the well. Like, and it's like that, like... while you guys were talking, I was doing a Google search because I was just curious where this landed on, like, I was looking like Lovecraft adaptations best to worst or whatever.
Yeah.
And no one has done that yet, but people have done like, here's 5 of the best and here's 5 of the worst. I clicked through 4 different articles. None of them mention this movie in the best or worst category, which leads you to believe it's just smack in the middle.
Well, right. Let me be clear. When I said that this is a faithful adaptation
Doesn't mean it's good.
It does not mean that it's a great movie. But I, as someone who love Lovecraftian shit and sea monsters, get a kick out of it. So if you have those tastes, you can find things that you love in this movie. I don't think that it's a perfect watch experience.
No, and this was fun. I'm glad I revisited it, but it's also one where I'm like, I think I'm done on Dagon. Like, I don't think that there's going to be like a period where I decide like 20 years from now that I need to revisit Dagon again and like, I'm like, this was fine. It's one of those movies where when it's doing the right thing, it's doing it so right.
Yeah.
Like when they're removing that dude's
bleak,
face, it's
dude.
I was like screaming.
I fast forwarded.
Yeah.
I actually fast forwarded because I was uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And there's bleak moments that in that third act that I'm like, whoo. Yeah. Okay, we're not just in like a fun fish village.
Yeah.
Like this is, this is fucking bleak.
But then it just does something fucking bonkers ass as well. And you're just like, what the hell is happening in this movie?
What's happening? What's happening?
Yeah.
And isn't that like, I mean, I keep referencing, I don't know. Stuart Gordon is not a director that I would be like, that's a Gordon thing. But isn't that it? Like Reanimator, From Beyond, Dolls, like all of those things have this, like, he's a goofball. But then he's like, oh, but it's also the end of the world. Bye.
Yeah, I think that this is
so weird.
This is like somehow a combination of what I would say is like the ultimate of like Stuart Gordon films, while also probably one of my least favorite Stuart Gordon films. Like,
sure,
because you are right. Like, I mean, we're talking about a guy who co-wrote Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. You know what I mean? Like, the dude's so bonkers with tone. But yeah, it's like I'm looking at his filmography, and if we're just looking at the filmography real quick, he kicks it off with Reanimator, immediately does From Beyond and Dolls, then he writes Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, and I guess with all that Disney money makes Robot Jocks, and then goes back to Full Moon to make Pit and the Pendulum, gets to be the executive producer on Honey, I Blew Up the Kids. So he gets more money, and then he makes Fortress that year. Writes the Body Snatchers movie that we love.
91?
Yeah.
93, yeah. Then does Castle Freak, Space Truckers. The Wonderful Ice Cream Suit, which I've heard a bunch of people say is an amazing movie.
I feel like every time we talk about Stuart Gordon, we bring up that Ice Cream Suit movie. This is like the fourth time on the show that we've talked about it.
It is. That's going on my Patreon pick.
Sure.
I
wouldn't fight you for that one.
It's a fantasy comedy film directed by Stuart Gordon, written by Ray Bradbury, and starring Joe Mantegna and Sid Caesar.
You couldn't have put monkeys in a room with typewriters and come up with that premise, you know?
No kidding.
It's like, and I barely know what the premise is. Like,
I don't even want to know what the premise is. Literally, Kyle, we'll give you an alley-oop so we can discuss that one. I'm not going to watch it before we watch it for Patreon, just FYI.
It premiered at Sundance.
That sounds right, yeah.
Yeah, 1990. But then he does this wonderful ice cream suit movie, and follows it with this. Like, it's just kind of like his career is just like there's no like rhyme or reason, except for honestly the part that has the most rhyme or reason is Reanimator, From Beyond and Dolls.
Yeah.
Like that trajectory I can follow, and it makes sense. And then everything else, which I mean, I guess you could throw on Stuart Gordon the same thing that I say about John Carpenter all the time. Like, Stuart's just making movies for Stuart. He does not care if the audience is into it or not, which is fine. But yeah, this movie I didn't hate it. Like, I need to stress that I did not dislike this movie. But I was just baffled by it.
You know, there are human stars in this movie, and then there's a practical effect star in this movie, and it's not what you think it is. It's Yusha's eyeliner, because that stuff is solid. She does not blink. She is underwater half the time, and her eyeliner is an eighth of an inch thick. It's phenomenal. I'm so impressed.
It is movie magic. It's crazy.
Yeah.
It is crazy. Her eyeballs are huge. And there are times where she is gorgeous. There are times when I'm scared. There are times like and nothing really changes eyes wise.
Yeah,
A lot changes.
It's literally the
below
way
the
she's
belt,
looking
but,
at someone. How hungry are you,
Yeah.
Yusha? You know?
Yes. Yeah, it's crazy.
What was that
I
sound?
absolutely loved it though. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't. I was trying to,
Don't. You don't have to be.
I'm drinking sea mist from Thimble Island. It's another New England.
Wow,
Thought you were going to say semen.
Yeah, I was about to say that. You had me in the first half there.
Sea mist.
Yeah,
mist.
She missed. I don't even know.
What are you
her.
drinking? Semen?
No, I'm actually doing a dark and stormy because
Hell yes.
and for the uninitiated, a dark and stormy is dark rum with lime and ginger beer, and it's delightful. It's also mostly limeade because, like I said, Daddy's a lightweight.
So I did. I was looking at a note that I had in my notes, and I just realized what it was in reference to, and I had to share it because I wrote, I think my favorite scene in this whole movie is the jump scare involving a big mouth bass on the wall. And all I could imagine when I wrote that note was obviously he turns around and there's this big ass fish head mounted on the wall. But I was imagining that same scene with the singing bass, just singing a song at him.
Dude, can you imagine?
Comedic brilliance. That's the type of humor I expect Stuart Gordon to slam into one of these bleak movies.
I think that you are. We're giving the first act way too much shit because if you want comedic timing and kind of slapstick humor, when they're the whatchamacallit, like the boat gets some bad weather and they're about to smack into some rocks and there's this quick cut. It could not be more than 2 seconds and it's the woman down in the galley or like whatever, she's in one of the bedrooms and she's putting on face cream and she just kind of like looks up confused for like a split second and then they smash into the rocks and then she has that face cream on in various stages of sloughing off as she and her husband are like in the water as water is like entering the hull of the boat and I'm like that's a joke. Stuart Gordon was going for the ha-has there.
Yeah. No, I mean, look, another thing that I have to call out, listen, we're not a podcast here that likes to objectify or anything. We're not here to talk about people's bodies, ever. But I do always want to call out opening credit boobs because it's such a rare thing to have. Yeah. And we got them in this one. So, if that's your thing, if that's something that you're looking for and you don't want to wait.
Opening credits boobs and end of movie
and closing
boobs.
credit
yeah,
boobs.
Like you literally, it's a boob ending.
It's a perfect boob ending. Damn it!
So if we're talking about plays on words and puns, when Yusha and Pablo, whatever his name is, the guy from Miskatonic, I don't remember the main character.
I think Paul is right.
I think it's Paul but she calls him Paolo or Pablo because they're Italian or somewhere in the Mediterranean. I don't know. In any case, he meets Yusha, who is surprise his fucking sister, half sister. But he's like, I dreamed about you, and then they do the weirdest awkward kiss, and their tongues are fighting, and I was like, man. I want to do just a fake trailer for a movie about killer body parts and call it Tongue Tickles.
And I think you should.
I think I caught that a couple times on Showtime.
It's a we thing.
Dude, I would watch Tongue Tickles on Showtime. Do you think it's on Pirate Bay now, or
probably?
We'll have to go to one of the hubs to get it.
Paul is such a fucking dweeb.
I love it.
He is such a dweeb. That's the other big problem with this movie is, man, what an unlikable main character that we follow for the entirety of this movie.
I think that we're forgetting, well, maybe Matt is forgetting, that the vast majority of main characters in Lovecraftian stuff are shitheads. The men
Oh
are
yeah, no, I
awful.
get that. It just doesn't mean that I necessarily want to watch it. Like,
Oh, sure, yeah, I get it.
I feel like again, if we're gonna compare this to the other Lovecraftian movies that Stuart Gordon has done, like, not saying that any of the characters in Reanimator or From Beyond aren't shitheads, but they're much more like digestible, easy to follow shitheads.
I just didn't believe this dude being that much of a shithead.
Yeah.
I actually
Because he looks like a pushover. He looks like a
He's a
fucking
finance
dweeb.
bro. Just got to keep in mind he's a finance bro.
Yeah. No, and I think that type of person, maybe it's like I don't want to say generational thing, but it's like a 2001 finance bro. I didn't get. Do you know what I mean?
You're thinking
like maybe he's a little
millennial
more
finance bro, Gen Z finance bro. He's a Gen X
the
finance
thing.
bro.
Yeah, but it's like on that like cusp, right? So it's like, I don't know. I don't do this often, but with movies that are like this, and with a lot of movies that I like, I do think of how they would be adapted now, right? Like not like, and because this feels ripe for some, but it's Lovecraft, so like that's where it gets touchy, right?
Yeah, it's
nobody
one thing to
wants
do
necessarily watch a
Lovecraftian, and then there's another thing to do straight Lovecraft in 2024.
Which is right, and it's like I would love to see this movie redone, but unfortunately the source material is like not a very fertile soil for
No
it.
matter how you cut it, a dude's gonna have to fuck his half sister. So
yeah,
it's
and it's
rough.
like maybe I can make that a more original thing as opposed to a based on. I'm just kidding. It gets uncomfortable, right? It just gets uncomfy. But anyway, he was such a dweeb until the very last act for me, and I was like, oh, it clicks. Like his sort of like, oh my god, this is happening to me. Arc. As opposed to him being a finance bro, I was like, oh yeah, no, now you're sad and maddened, like now you're crazy, like your brain is broken now. And I like, that's where like when the bleakness seeps in, I like the movie a lot more, but it takes some things to get there.
Yeah. I feel like we are coming down harder on this movie because it is a good movie. It was a good watch. It's just not like Scott said, if you're into fucking sea fish monsters and like Lovecraftian shit, like boy does this have it in spades.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily what I sometimes look for in a movie. I look for big ass insects and alligators. That's
and
my
boobs
bread
at
and
the
butter.
beginning and at the end, so it had some things.
That is true. It did check a couple boxes, just not all of them.
Hey, welcome to Unstable Topics, a fast-paced, jam-packed, unhinged bestie podcast filled with facts, reacts, and made-up games in between.
We're your hosts, Sarah
And Maggie.
and we're excited for you to join our best friend hangout, where we surprise one another with things we find interesting or hilarious just to see how the other will react.
Our friendship might be totally stable, but you never know what your bestie might throw your way to knock you off your game.
So come shake things up, learn something new, and laugh along with us. This is Unstable Topics.
Meanwhile, in New Jersey,
So, Marissa, what talking points do you want to hit on in this week's episode?
Well, Jackie, let's talk about how the film addresses the patriarchy. Ooh, and representation of marginalized people. Ooh, and even philosophical ramifications of good versus evil in horror.
We can point out the triangle boobs, talk about the blood splatter, and the practical effects. And also the male gaze.
My gaze at the males.
Hi-yo! From feminism to fangirling, the Jersey Ghouls cover all the bases of horror from a woman's perspective.
New episodes are uploaded every other Sunday.
Just search Jersey Ghouls to find us on social media and your favorite podcasting app.
91 Donkey Lane is a magical apartment complex that contains immense power, but lacks intelligent inhabitants.
What is happening?
I'm getting texts.
Why are we getting a lot of texts?
People found out what we did.
Oh, dividing Mike Myers into an infinite amount of tiny Mike Myers?
Listen to 91 Donkey Lane for free on Spotify or your favorite podcasting app. More at 91donkeylane.com. See you there, you donkeys.
If you were watching this movie with me and I was a little blasé towards it, do you have a double feature that could maybe save the evening?
So I have a second activity for the night. Not a movie, but I would dust off the old GameCube and I would play some Resident Evil 4 with you while playing the band Dagon in the background, specifically their album Ocean Metal. That came out in, I want to say, 2009, and they're from Michigan, and fantastic. They're still around, I guess. They're one of those bands that like never really broke out, but I knew about them because of being in the metal scene at the time, and they do a lot of what I like. You know, it's like shreddy, but it's also not. It's very over the top, but it's also all of it is about sea monsters, and almost every record I think they do at least one song with falsettos, like the title track on Ocean Metal is fantastic, and I will hopefully remember when this drops to post a link to the song Ocean Metal by Dagon. But Resident Evil 4, the reason why I would pick that for us to do after watching this is because it's very much a mutating villagers that you have to avoid and fight kind of game, and I played the fuck out of it in 2005. So 2004, 2005, I would have probably have watched Dagon and then played GameCube, played Resident Evil 4 on GameCube. So that's the way that I would have us party.
Cool. All right. How about you, Kyle?
I would watch The Ruins. I like felt a lot of Ruins vibes here, and I think that would be a really fun double feature.
Also, unlikable people.
Yeah.
Also
I need
super
to read the
people.
book though. Like it comes up every time I go to Barnes and Noble. It's like smacking me in the face. Like you should buy a copy of this. I'm like, ugh.
I wonder if they have the audiobook for it.
Well, and I'm going to go with a movie that I have talked about a million times on how much I love it. But it also involves a mermaid. So I'm going to go with The Lighthouse with Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe. Just a really fun, weird art house movie that, I don't know, just does it for me. That movie just does it for me.
And that's super Lovecraftian.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, well, we have finished Creature Feature Weekend at the time that you're listening to this, but great news for you guys. That means that all of the new merch that we made for Creature Feature Weekend is available on our store. So go to hmnpodcast.com. Check out some of the new shirts that we got printed up. And also, while you're doing that, hit up our Patreon, patreon.com/hmnpodcast. And, be cool. Be cool. We're cool. We try to be cool
about it.
And now, lastly, Scott, what did you watch, read, listen to, etc. that you want to talk about?
So I know that I am the seasonally appropriate guy. So this isn't going to seem like something that I would be like, hey, I watched this in the spring and I'm talking about it and it's almost May. But Thanksgiving, it dropped on Netflix.
It's on Netflix. It's the next thing I plan to watch on Netflix. So I'm very excited.
I enjoyed it thoroughly. It's definitely great to have a legit slasher movie for Thanksgiving that isn't Blood Rage, because I love Blood Rage, but if you want to watch more than one, or if you don't want to watch Blood Rage every year, I don't know why you wouldn't. Thanksgiving is super fun. The reason why I'm mentioning it though is the masshole accents in it are so pronounced. I love it. I was actually texting my buddy Mario, and he was like, oh, I hated that about that. It's like my least favorite accent. I'd rather listen to, like thick West Virginia accents. I'm like, well, like my paternal side of the family all comes from Northeast Massachusetts, almost New Hampshire. And so I really love that accent. And there are times in this when in Dagon, when Paul does a little bit of a masshole accent, because Miskatonic University is supposed to be in Massachusetts, but it's not nearly as pronounced as Thanksgiving, and it really. So Eli Roth, I have said before, is the horror lover I want to hang out with, but not watch his movies. Don't really like the movies that he makes. That said, I really enjoyed Thanksgiving. I think that it hit the stride of what I want from an Eli Roth movie. And I would say it's my favorite Eli Roth horror movie. So, you know, I mean, it's...
I love that for you.
It's finally like the vibe.
It hit.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's nice. That's nice.
It's not a perfect
I've heard
slasher.
good things about it.
I enjoyed it thoroughly, and it is my favorite Eli Roth film.
Nice.
All right. How about you, Kyle?
I went on vacation recently, and actually two things. One, the first half of this book I listened to while driving to meet you, Matt, in New Jersey. And the second half I read while on vacation, while traveling on vacation. It was one of those things where it's like you don't realize, it's weird. Half of it was audiobook, half of it was physical book. And it's a weird thing when you realize how much of the audiobook you listen to when you pick up the book physically, and you're like, oh my God, I actually am halfway through this book, because listening just takes a different time. But I read Dennis Lehane's Darkness Take My Hand. And Dennis Lehane, I think he did, like, he's a 90s mystery author. I think he did Gone Girl, or he did he did Shutter Island, Mystic River, Gone Baby Gone. Like, he's a relatively well-known writer that I never read anything of. And my buddy Evan recommended this book because he feels that it is like the most horror leaning of it, and it is pretty horrific. Like, it's about a serial killer in the Boston area, and Patrick Kenzie, the detective, going after him. And it's like not necessarily a genre of book I think I would ever really pick up. I'm not a big like suspense mystery thriller guy, and particularly that like mid 90s boom of them it just doesn't tickle my fancy. But it was a suggestion from my buddy, and the audiobook was available immediately, and then I also had the hard copy. So I got into it, and I think that the horror and the serial killer aspects of it all are fantastic. It's reminiscent of a Thomas Harris, Red Dragon, Silence of the Lambs scenario. I think that there's a lot of that in there. For me being a New Englander, there's a lot of references and sort of cultural stuff that I feel like I understand and can relate to. It's a mystery about a neighborhood, like a New England neighborhood, a working class neighborhood that exists and has history, right? So it's like I attach to that really well. But then at the same time, there's some real 90s mystery writer shit, male mystery writer shit that happens where like the female the female coworker has in a love triangle, or like there's sexual tension that just keeps bubbling and bubbling. And I'm like, yeah, I get that, and I don't need that as part of it. Anyway, all that to say, it was a genre that I don't read a lot of, and I really enjoyed this book. It takes place in 96, or it was written in 96, so there's some references to like grunge music and some other like, if venues that are from Boston at that time and place, and it's a fun read. And I think I've said this on the show before, if you ever have something that's sort of like keep getting recommended to you or suggested to you that's outside of your realm, take a chance on it. It's always fun. I don't often do that. Time doesn't necessarily allow me to. I chose to do it on vacation, and it was worthwhile.
All right. And I'll go last. Mine's going to be really quick. I finished the series Reservation Dogs on Hulu. It's just a good show. It's a good show. Yeah. Representation, a lot of first people starring and writing about their experiences, but it's a fun coming of age comedy. A lot of people would recommended it to me. People would recommended me that and The Bear. I think I prefer The Bear overall. Like the dramedy of The Bear hit me better, but I also had experience working in a kitchen, so it reminds me of like, oh man, when I worked in like the Villanova kitchen, or when I did this, even just working at like a pizza place. Just the insanity of dealing with food service, whereas like I don't have much that I can pull from my personal life to connect with living on a reservation. So,
yeah, exactly.
But it was still very good. I highly recommend it, and we highly recommend checking out Dagon while it's on Tubi. And we highly recommend checking out whatever the hell it is we're talking about next week. So stay tuned for more Horror Movie Night.
Hey, welcome to Unstable Topics, a fast-paced, jam-packed, unhinged bestie podcast filled with facts, reacts, and made-up games in between.
We're your hosts, Sarah
And Maggie.
and we're excited for you to join our best friend hangout, where we surprise one another with things we find interesting or hilarious just to see how the other will react.
Our friendship might be totally stable, but you never know what your bestie might throw your way to knock you off your game.
So come shake things up, learn something new, and laugh along with us. This is Unstable Topics.
Meanwhile, in New Jersey,
So, Marissa, what talking points do you want to hit on in this week's episode?
Well, Jackie, let's talk about how the film addresses the patriarchy. Ooh, and representation of marginalized people. Ooh, and even philosophical ramifications of good versus evil in horror.
We can point out the triangle boobs, talk about the blood splatter, and the practical effects. And also the male gaze.
My gaze at the males.
Hi-yo! From feminism to fangirling, the Jersey Ghouls cover all the bases of horror from a woman's perspective.
New episodes are uploaded every other Sunday.
Just search Jersey Ghouls to find us on social media and your favorite podcasting app.
You're listening to the Geekscape Network.